Welcome back. Today, we're taking a trip into the world of an original story, one of mystery and an unknown murder. If you enjoy stories like this, and you want more in the future, consider subscribing and tapping the bell to be notified when new stories go live every single week. Now, lay back, relax, and enjoy the story. Whisperwind Estate didn't stand so much as it crouched on its hill, a sprawling labyrinth of slate roofs and darkened windows overlooking the misty fens. It was less a home and more a monument to the eccentric genius of its owner, Silas Croft, a reclusive inventor whose creations were the stuff of legend, and whose fortune was a source of endless speculation. Silas was found dead in his workshop, a vast cathedral-like space filled with silent skeletal remains of his half-finished machines. He was slumped over a console, a thin trickle of blood from his nose, the air thick with the smell of ozone. An experimental energy source hummed with a low residue power. The official cause of death was listed as a cardiac arrest, likely induced by a massive electrical surge from the device. It was, to the local constabulary, a tragic but straightforward accident. But Detective Harding was a man who didn't believe in straightforward accidents, especially not when a fortune the size of a small country was at stake. Harding was a weary, methodical man, his career a long, slow march through the worst of human nature. As he surveyed the scene, he noted the subtle signs of disarray. A shattered beaker in the corner, far from the central console, a schematic on the workbench partially burned, as if by a deliberate flame, rather than an electrical surge. He looked at the faces of a small group gathered in the great hall, a collection of vultures, waiting for the lion to be well and truly dead. There was Leo, Silas' nephew and only living blood relative, a man whose ambition was a poorly tailored suit he couldn't quite fill. He had been pressuring his uncle for many years to sell his patents, a suggestion Silas had always furiously rejected. Then there was Dr. Aris Thorne, Silas's former protege, a brilliant mind cast out years ago for alleged plagiarism. He had been seen in the local village of the week of Silas' death, his presence a quiet, simmering threat. And finally, there was Agnes, the housekeeper. She had been with Silas for 30 years, a prim, unassuming woman who managed the estate with rather fantastic efficiency. She seemed the most genuinely grief-stricken, her hands clutching a handkerchief, her eyes downcast. She was the one who had found the body. Harding began his work, peeling back the layers of Whisperwind Estate. The house was a maze of secrets and automated contraptions. He found that Silas had been working on a revolutionary power source, one that would make his already considerable fortune seem like pocket change. He also found that Silas was on the verge of cutting Leo out of his will entirely, favoring a research foundation instead. A search of Aris Thorne's rented cottage revealed notes and calculations that mirrored Silas's own, suggesting a desperate attempt to steal or replicate the work. The accident was beginning to look less and less like, well, an accident. The investigation deepened, and the clean narrative of an accident began to fray. Harding discovered that the primary safety regulator on Silas's machine had been bypassed. It was a sophisticated bit of sabotage requiring intimate knowledge of the inventor's work. Suspicion immediately fell on Dr. Thorne. His history, his proximity, his own research, it all painted the picture of a man desperate to reclaim his stolen glory. A man capable of murdering his former mentor and making it look like a tragic miscalculation. Thorne's alibi for the time of death was also weak, a solitary walk through the fens with no one to corroborate his story. But Harding's methodical nature wouldn't let him settle on the obvious answer. He turned his attention back to Leo. The nephew was in deep financial trouble, a fact he had carefully concealed. His creditors were closing in, and his uncle's fortune was his only way out. Harding discovered emails showing Leo had been trying to hire a corporate espionage expert to steal Silas's research. And when that failed, had he resorted to more permanent measures? The partially burned schematic in the workshop could have been Leo's clumsy attempt to destroy evidence of his snooping, an act that inadvertently led to the fatal power surge. Through it all, Agnes the housekeeper remained a constant, quiet presence. She was helpful, providing Harding with schedules, access codes, and endless cups of tea. She spoke of her employer with a reverence that bordered on worship, recounting his kindness, his moments of brilliance, his profound loneliness. She was the picture of loyalty, a fixed point in the chaotic orbit of the other suspect's greed. She seemed almost invisible, a part of the house itself, and Harding, like everyone else, found his gaze sliding right past her. The focus remained squarely on the two men who had the most obvious motives. The pressure mounted, and it seemed like only a matter of time before either Leo or Aris confessed. Harding gathered the three of them in Silas's study, the room a museum of a brilliant but troubled life. He laid out the evidence piece by damning piece. He spoke of the bypassed regulator, the financial troubles, the professional jealousy. He watched Leo and Aris, saw the flicker of fear in their eyes. The case was all but closed, and the evidence pointed overwhelmingly to Dr. Thorne, whose technical expertise made him the only one capable of such a precise sabotage. And then, the first twist. Harding revealed a hidden entry in Silas Croft's digital lab journal, time-stamped just minutes before his death. In it, Silas wrote that he was bypassing the regulator himself. He was frustrated with the lack of progress, and in a fit of arrogance and impatience, decided to push the machine beyond its safety limits, convinced that he could control it. The surge had been a direct result of his own hubris. The death, as the local police had first summarized, was a self-inflicted accident. The burn schematic was the result of a small contained fire from an earlier failed test. A wave of silence filled the room. Leo and Aris looked at each other, the animosity between them replaced by a shared, dumbfounded relief. But Harding wasn't finished. His gaze for the first time settled on Agnes. He spoke again, this time, his voice low. The death was an accident, yes, but it was an accident that had been meticulously planned. Agnes, the devoted housekeeper, had been tending to Silas for 30 years. She hadn't just been his servant, she had been his student, quietly observing, learning, and understanding his work with a depth no one had ever suspected. She knew of his occasional recklessness. She knew that when frustrated, he would push his machines too far. For weeks, she had been subtly altering his research data, introducing tiny, almost imperceivable errors into his calculations, creating a feedback loop of frustrations she knew would eventually lead him to take drastic and fatal risks. Her motive was the simplest of all. a hidden, handwritten will tucked away in a safe that only she knew the combination to, left the entirety of the Croft estate and all of its patents to her, his most loyal and steadfast companion. The will had only one condition, that it had to be considered valid if his death was not deemed to be a murder or any kind of foul play. A ruling of accidental death was the only outcome that would make her the wealthiest woman in the country. She had played the long game, a ghost in the machine, manipulating not the wires but the man himself. Harding laid it all out, the theory as elegant and as horrifying as one of Silas's own inventions. But that's all it was, a theory. The altered data was indistinguishable from Silas's own errors. There was no physical evidence, no confession. There was only the quiet, unnerving smile that touched Agnes's lips for the briefest of moments. She stood there, a small woman in a plain dress, having inherited the future. She had committed the perfect crime, and she had offered to pour one last cup of tea to everyone in the room. Slowly, one by one, they all dropped their teacups with remnants of poison inside to the floor, shattering. Harding fell to the ground, looking up at the small woman in the plain dress, who had gotten away with it all and wiped out the competition in the process. That's all for this story. If you're still with us, consider checking out another one of our adventures. YouTube should have put a couple on screen for you. And of course, consider subscribing for more calm, weekly stories just like this. Farewell, my wonderful heroes.